The Legalise Cannabis Party says it's high time recreational cannabis use is legalised in Australia. It's making a joint push in 3 states, tabling legislation to allow adults to possess and grow small quantities of the drug at home. Dr Brian Walker is the leader of WA's Legalise Cannabis Party. Good afternoon to you, Dr Walker. Tell us about these changes that you're pushing for.
Good afternoon. It's not really a change, it's more making something very clear. At a national level in 3 states, we're now looking at allowing cannabis to be grown, small amounts for individual use, to keep that for yourself and also to share with your friends.
Are we talking about just growing it or would this legalised bill allow more? For instance, could you pop into a cafe for a brownie?
That's an excellent question. Not yet, but that's something very close, I do believe. The first thing we have to do is to make sure that cannabis as a legal substance can be grown and kept at home. We're not talking about selling it for profit, just how to use it yourself.
It's already happening in the ACT. Is WA ready to do the same?
Oh, WA is more than ready. We're a very mature state here. The ACT has done this for about 2 years now, 3 years, and they have got no problems whatsoever. And I think WA is just as good, if not better, than the ACT.
You're a doctor. What would personal use mean for someone?
Well, using cannabis when you come home from a hard day's work rather than a 6-pack of beer is undoubtedly better for you physically, mentally. The domestic violence would go down, you'd have a good night's sleep, there'd be no hangover in the morning, it'd be just wonderful for recreational use. From a medicinal point of view, we could get a lot of treatment here for, say, anxiety, the stress we're seeing there, but also pain. Rather than popping Panadol, which is not the best drug, a bit of cannabis could be very helpful for your headaches, for your aches and pains, arthritis.
You've highlighted what you consider to be the pros. What about the cons, the dangers?
Well, it's very difficult to say. I mean, alcohol kills about 6,500 people every year in Australia. Cannabis, 0. So from the safety point of view, it's very good. However, you can misuse it. Giving cannabis to young, growing brains is just not a good idea. So we want to legalise this so we can regulate and make sure that the right people have access, but not people who are too young or too at risk. Other areas, people say, well, psychology, maybe you can get some psychotic process. Did you know that alcohol is far more dangerous for causing psychosis than cannabis? Same is true for tobacco, more dangerous than cannabis for causing psychosis.
It is a popular topic with viewers on our Facebook page. Susie Evans writes, I hope so, meaning legalised. It's costing me $265 per month for it on prescription. Well, how would medicinal cannabis users stand to benefit, Dr Walker?
Well, certainly the cost will go down. It must be said that medicinal cannabis is very specific. You can get specific amounts. Growing it in your backyard is more difficult. It's a bit like actually making your own beer or going to the pub and buying your beer. So creating your own cannabis for use at home is not as easy as you think, nor is growing it, but it would bring the costs down.
Walker Douglas asks, would we need to get registered?
Not as such. The main thing is to stop the police invading our privacy and taking us up for cannabis. If you're able to use it freely and within small amounts without selling it, you should be fine. Anyone can use it.
Susan Nahu says, believe and celebrate it when I see it myself. Doctor, these bills are doomed to fail, aren't they, with no backing from the major parties?
Well, I heard that Rita Saffioti already has refused to acknowledge the possibility of getting this through the chambers. It's not going to happen. Now, the sad thing is that they're not listening to the people. This may be typical for the government. They're not listening to the vast majority who say, well, legalising cannabis, 79% of our population agrees with that. Why doesn't the government allow this to happen? I really don't know.
Kelly Best writes, I think it gives kids that nudge. Can't be that bad. It's legal now. Teenager's brain. How do you address concerns that use amongst teens will go up?
Well, that's a very good question indeed. Where we've legalised cannabis, the actual youth use of cannabis goes down. We've seen this in other jurisdictions in North America and Canada. Once you've legalised cannabis, we can also regulate it. It's like taking alcohol. You can get alcohol for youth, but it's not the done thing. Same thing for cannabis. They'll be able to access it, but the numbers will be quite low. In fact, they'll be lower than they are now, where it's in the hands of criminals. Far safer to make it legalised and take it out of the hands of criminals.
This one from Mick Stanley. I don't think a single person needs 6 plants. 2 good plants should produce more than enough for 1 person. Maybe 6 per household would be better.
Well, that's a discussion we could have. If you need medicinal cannabis, say for example you're making an oil, an edible oil for treating your cancer, you will need 6. If you've got several people in the house who've got the problems, insomnia for example, arthritis, you're going to need a bit more than 2 plants. Also depends on the yield of the plant. We can't predict. We think 6 is a good number.
Darren Turner reckons won't do you much good. You can legalise it for personal use, but you're still barred from most occupations or driving any vehicle on a public road.
What a wonderful question. This is what we're working for. The point is we don't want anyone driving impaired. We don't want anyone working a dangerous job while impaired. But presence of THC does not equate to impairment. Sleep deprivation gives you about the same as a 0.05% alcohol when you're driving, which 0.05 makes you have twice as many accidents as without any alcohol at all. We need to look at impairment, not presence of substance.
Well, Jo DeLee disagrees with you because she says that marijuana use impairs driving skills and increases the risk for car collisions. What evidence have you to suggest otherwise?
Well, how many papers do you want? There's plenty of papers out there. When you take cannabis immediately, for the next 4 hours, you probably are impaired. Just if you're going to be taking alcohol at the bar, you need to be careful when you're driving. How much are you taking? When are you taking it? So yes, it does impair you in the short term, and that has to be acknowledged. So driving when impaired is absolutely not a good idea. But international study shows that accidents do not increase when you have cannabis legalised.
Well, as mentioned, the bills will need support from major parties to become law. Dr. Brian Walker, keep us posted.
I will indeed.